Have you ever noticed that the deeper your thoughts go, the more distant the world seems to become? That the more clearly you perceive, the fewer people stay willing to listen? It's not an illusion. History itself shows that society has always been uneasy around those who see beyond its comfort zone. From Socrates to Galileo, from Nietzsche to Tesla, the story repeats. Visionaries who glimpsed truths ahead of their time were mocked, silenced, or erased. Not because they lacked reason, but because their insight disturbed the peace of collective ignorance. The German philosopher Schopenhauer once said, "Intelligence is less a blessing than a burden, a sharp lens that separates those who see too clearly from those who prefer the blur." Why does this happen? Why does society recoil from minds that question the surface? The explanation lies not in history, but in human psychology. Think about this. When you stand beside someone physically stronger, you don't feel threatened. You admire them. When you meet someone wealthy, you might envy them, but rarely does it shake your self-worth. But place yourself before someone intellectually deeper, and something curious happens. A quiet discomfort arises, not from what they say, but from what they reflect. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't simply share new perspectives. They unconsciously reveal the limits of others' understanding. And people rarely forgive that. Intellectual depth becomes a mirror no one asked for. Even when the thinker speaks gently, their clarity exposes the vagueness of others' reasoning. Intelligence provokes something that physical or financial superiority does not. Identity threat. That's because intelligence is intertwined with who we believe ourselves to be. Our sense of self is built around our thoughts, our beliefs, our grasp of the world. When someone introduces ideas that challenge that framework, it feels less like a debate and more like an invasion. Unlike strength or wealth, intellect confronts the mind itself, the seat of personal identity. So instead of admiration, people often respond with defensiveness. It's not arrogance on the part of the thinker that creates distance. It's the insecurity of those who sense their own reflection in dimming. The deeper mind becomes an unwanted reminder of what others haven't explored. Throughout centuries, this dynamic has remained the same. Society edges its thinkers to the margins, not because they are hostile, but because their very presence dislodges comfort. Ask yourself, how many times have you tried to express a thought that reached beyond small talk, only to watch the conversation stall? How many times have you seen curiosity replaced with awkward silence? It's not coincidence. It's a form of psychological self-preservation. When confronted with complexity, the average mind instinctively retreats. Instead of inquiry comes evasion. Instead of dialogue comes dismissal. This is why philosophers, scientists, and visionaries so often end up in solitude. Not because they crave it, but because genuine engagement is rare. In most social settings, confidence is prized more than intelligence. People gravitate toward those who appear certain rather than those who invite them to question. History rewards charisma more than depth. Populist leaders, motivational icons, and influencers thrive not through insight, but through simplicity. The masses prefer conviction over contemplation. This is the paradox intelligence creates. The closer one moves toward truth, the farther one drifts from acceptance. The mirror effect exposes not only how people respond to intellect, but why societies resist progress. Intelligence doesn't threaten civilization by what it discovers. It threatens by what it demands. Change. And change unsettles the tribal instinct. Neuroscience has begun to confirm this ancient pattern. When individuals feel intellectually outmatched, the brain's amygdala, the center responsible for fear, lights up as if facing danger. In other words, exposure to greater intellect can activate the same neural response as a physical threat. It's not metaphorical, it's measurable. But why would thought trigger fear? The answer lies in evolution. For early humans, survival didn't depend on being the most insightful, it depended on belonging. To the prehistoric mind, isolation meant death. Those who defied the tribe risked expulsion, and expulsion meant extinction. Thus, the brain evolved to equate acceptance with safety and dissent with danger. When a highly analytical person enters a group, they unconsciously disrupt that equilibrium. They question assumptions, alter hierarchies, and expose illusions. The tribe responds defensively, not out of logic, but instinct. The thinker becomes a perceived threat, not for their intent, but for their difference. This is why deep thinkers often find peace in private rather than in crowds. It's not a lack of social skill, it's biological mismatch. Society built for harmony often rejects those built for truth. A Stanford study in 2021 even revealed that discomfort with intelligence increases in group contexts. One-on-one, people admire intellect. In crowds, they resist it. When social comparison enters the equation, fear magnifies. People no longer judge the thinker's ideas, they judge their own reflection in the thinker's light. That is why intellectual connection thrives in intimacy but dies in public. It explains why thinkers seek solitude, not because they disdain company, but because in silence they're free from the invisible hostility that truth provokes. Psychologists have identified several mental patterns that explain why deep thinkers often collide with resistance rather than curiosity. One is the Dunning-Kruger effect, the strange bias that causes people with limited understanding to overestimate their competence, while those with genuine depth often underestimate theirs. This imbalance creates friction. Those who know the least speak with the most confidence, and those who know the most question themselves. When a humble intellect meets inflated ignorance, the result is dismissal. Then there's status quo bias, the brain's built-in preference for stability over uncertainty. New ideas, especially complex ones, demand effort. They force the mind to reorganize what it believes. So instead of exploring them, people cling to what's familiar. Add to that the backfire effect, where presenting evidence against someone's belief doesn't change their mind, but strengthens it. And you begin to see why deep conversation so often dies before it begins. These cognitive shields are the psychological armor of the collective. They ensure that societies change slowly, if at all. Even in the digital era, this resistance has only evolved, not disappeared. Online, algorithms amplify what comforts rather than what challenges. Platforms reward outrage, simplicity, and emotion because they generate engagement, not understanding. Viral ideas are rarely profound. They are short, bright sparks designed for instant reaction. A well-reasoned argument, which takes time to process, simply cannot compete with a sensational headline. As a result, the internet has become an amplifier of noise rather than thought, favoring entertainment over enlightenment. But this rejection of depth begins long before adulthood. It starts within the institutions that shape minds. Schools, for example, often praise obedience over originality. They reward students who memorize and conform more than those who question or innovate. Intelligence in such a system becomes a liability. A child who asks why too often is branded as disruptive rather than curious. Workplaces continue the pattern. Corporations value those who maintain harmony and protect hierarchies more than those who challenge them. Politics, too, rewards certainty over complexity. A simple lie travels further than a nuanced truth. This preference for comfort over clarity is deeply rooted in human wiring. The mind seeks cognitive ease, the satisfaction that comes when information feels familiar and effortless to process. Difficult truths demand energy, so the brain treats them as threats. Another mechanism, system justification theory, explains why people defend existing structures even when they're unjust. Change feels unsafe. Combine that with groupthink, the tribal tendency to prioritize belonging over accuracy, and you understand why deep thinkers, who disrupt comfort, demand precision, and reject conformity, inevitably clash with the mainstream. History mirrors these patterns again and again. Galileo was condemned for revealing that Earth moved around the sun. The same church that silenced him now celebrates him as a genius. Van Gogh painted worlds no one wanted to see until he was gone. Nikola Tesla dreamed of free energy and died in poverty, while others profited from his imagination. Alan Turing helped end a world war, only to be punished for who he was. Hypatia of Alexandria taught logic and reason in an age ruled by superstition and was murdered for it. In every age, brilliance arrives early and pays for it. Society does not fear intellect itself. It fears what intellect exposes. That fear also explains why confidence, not intelligence, often dominates the public stage. People are drawn to those who radiate certainty, even when their ideas are shallow. Charisma soothes, complexity disturbs. This is why populists and influencers thrive. They confirm existing emotions instead of confronting them. They simplify what is difficult and dramatize what is trivial, giving audiences the illusion of understanding without the discomfort of growth. Meanwhile, the thinkers who invite genuine reflection are sidelined, labeled as too heavy, too strange, or too serious. Arthur Schopenhauer described this tension with ruthless honesty. To him, intelligence was a double-edged gift, clarity that feels like exile. He believed that awareness itself separates one from happiness. The more a person sees, the less they can pretend. According to Schopenhauer, most people live guided by what he called the will to live, the blind drive for pleasure, comfort, and survival. But deep thinkers are pulled by a different force, the will to truth. They pursue understanding even when it dismantles illusion, even when it costs peace of mind. That pursuit creates distance. Where most find satisfaction in routine pleasures, thinkers see layers of distraction. Small talk feels hollow, social rituals redundant, ambition absurd. They observe the endless cycle of desire and disappointment and ask whether any of it holds meaning. This questioning spirit makes them appear detached, but detachment is merely clarity stripped of disguise. Schopenhauer argued that happiness and intelligence rarely coexist. The same awareness that reveals beauty also exposes futility. Ignorance, not wisdom, often shields people from despair. It's no surprise then that many great minds wrestled with loneliness, depression, or existential fatigue. Pascal, Kafka, Nietzsche all felt the weight of seeing too much. For Schopenhauer, solitude was not punishment, but privilege. He advised the thoughtful to cherish isolation as fertile ground for creativity and insight. Seek companionship, he said, not from the crowd, but from kindred minds, alive or in books. Engage with the world, but cautiously. Share your depth only with those ready to receive it. His message still resonates. Intelligence brings both vision and vulnerability. It allows one to perceive truth, but also exposes them to misunderstanding. It frees and it isolates. Yet despite the pain it brings, it remains essential. Because every advance humanity has made, from philosophy to science to art, has come from someone willing to see differently. Society may resist the thinker, but it is the thinker who moves society forward. If society tends to resist deep thought, what exactly does it embrace instead? The answer is comfort, predictability, familiarity, and reassurance. Human beings evolved to crave stability over revelation. The brain's default mode favors what is known because certainty feels safe. Philosophers, scientists, and psychologists alike have observed that humanity's greatest enemy is not ignorance, but the anxiety that knowledge brings. At the root of this tendency lies a set of psychological reflexes that guard against discomfort. Cognitive ease makes the brain prefer information that is simple and recognizable. Complexity feels like friction. Unfamiliarity registers as danger. When an idea demands effort, the mind instinctively resists it. Add system justification theory, which explains our habit of defending existing structures, and groupthink, which pushes us to conform rather than stand alone, and the pattern becomes obvious. Humanity's survival instinct still whispers, stay with the group, don't challenge the fire circle. That instinct shapes the modern world. The education system praises memorization more than imagination. Students who recite efficiently are rewarded, while those who question too much are labeled difficult. The corporate world carries the same logic. Success goes not to the most inventive, but to the most agreeable. In politics, bold reasoning loses to comforting slogans. Institutions claim to value intelligence, yet what they truly prize is obedience, the kind that keeps the structure intact. Even in today's hyper-connected era, where knowledge should be limitless, the pattern persists. Digital algorithms now serve as the new gatekeepers of thought. They feed audiences what is easy to digest, not what expands the mind. Engagement is the metric of modern worth. Emotion and controversy spread faster than nuance. Viral sound bites drown out quiet insight. The more an idea challenges assumptions, the less the system rewards it. Online platforms transform discussion into performance, replacing depth with attention. This explains why the most followed voices are rarely the most thoughtful. The internet doesn't promote intellect, it promotes stimulation. Outrage, humor, and simplicity outperform reason because they trigger instant emotional reactions. The thoughtful mind moves slowly. The algorithm punishes slowness. In such an environment, a deep thinker must compress lifetimes of understanding into seconds of screen time or risk invisibility. But this dismissal of depth is not new. It only wears new clothes. History has always rewarded those who conform to comfort while marginalizing those who challenge it. Galileo was condemned for reordering the cosmos. Van Gogh died unseen, his brilliance recognized only when it no longer threatened convention. Tesla envisioned a world powered freely by energy itself, yet he starved while others profited. Alan Turing cracked codes that saved millions, but was destroyed for the person he loved. Hypatia of Alexandria was slaughtered for daring to teach logic where superstition ruled. Each of them stood too far ahead, and society responded the only way it knows, by resisting until it was safe to admire them. Why does humanity repeat this cycle? Because awareness threatens identity. To question what is comfortable is to risk who we think we are. The mind seeks narratives that preserve meaning. Truth often dismantles them. So the collective responds with dismissal, sometimes hostility, toward those who reveal its cracks. Even now, the world celebrates curiosity in theory, but punishes it in practice. It praises innovation only after it ceases to be dangerous. Modern culture amplifies this contradiction. We proclaim love for critical thinking, yet the systems we build, from schools to workplaces to media, reward conformity. The classroom prizes the right answer over the better question. The office values loyalty over originality. The timeline favors virality over veracity. Each environment reinforces the same lesson: think, but not too much. For deep thinkers, this reality becomes both challenge and call to wisdom. The world may never change its instinctive reaction to depth, but understanding that reaction can prevent despair. Schopenhauer hinted at this centuries ago when he advised thinkers to engage with the world carefully, not recklessly, to observe more than they reveal, to speak only where curiosity lives. Isolation, he said, can become a sanctuary rather than a sentence. And perhaps that is the paradox that defines intellectual life. Intelligence may distance, but it also liberates. To see clearly can be lonely, yet within that solitude lies the rare freedom to think without constraint. The same awareness that alienates from the crowd opens doors that conformity keeps closed. So if you often feel the tension between belonging and truth, remember this: your discomfort is not failure. It's evidence of perception. The loneliness that follows insight is not punishment. It is the echo of discovery. Every age has misunderstood its seers before learning from them. And though the present may resist, the future always catches up. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of philosophy's most unsparing realists, believed that intelligence is not a divine gift, but a heavy inheritance. Unlike thinkers who celebrated intellect as humanity's triumph, Schopenhauer saw it as a source of quiet torment. To him, awareness was a double-edged sword. It illuminates reality, but that very clarity exposes the futility of much that others find fulfilling. The sharper the mind, the thinner the veil of illusion, and without that veil, happiness becomes harder to sustain. At the center of his philosophy stands a concept he called the will, a blind, irrational force that drives all life. Most people, he said, are ruled by the will to live, the instinct to seek pleasure, comfort, and continuity. Their actions, whether chasing money, romance, or status, are guided by this blind current of desire. It keeps them busy and content enough to survive. But those of higher intellect, he argued, operate from a different impulse: the will to truth. Rather than pursuing pleasure, they pursue understanding, even when the truths they uncover bring discomfort. This is where the divide between ordinary consciousness and deep thought widens. For the average person, happiness depends on satisfying desires and sustaining comforting illusions. For the deep thinker, those illusions collapse under scrutiny. They see through the repetition of craving and consumption, recognizing how easily society mistakes distraction for meaning. Where others find solace in entertainment, ambition, or superficial conversation, thinkers detect patterns of avoidance. They see that most of life's noise exists to drown out silence, the very silence where truth lives. Such awareness can become isolating. To most, small talk feels natural. To the philosopher, it feels hollow. The games of status and appearance that sustain social life lose their grip. What excites the majority often appears trivial to the analytical mind. Schopenhauer understood this dissonance as the price of perception. The more clearly one sees the machinery of desire, the less one can pretend it is noble. As he wrote, a high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial. Not out of arrogance, but because participation requires a kind of blindness that intellect refuses to imitate. He saw human ambition as an illusion, a restless striving that never truly ends. People believe that success, love, or wealth will grant fulfillment, yet once achieved, the satisfaction fades and another desire replaces it. This cycle, he said, is the essence of suffering, the will's endless hunger for more. Intelligent people perceive this futility sooner, which makes them seem detached or even cynical. But their detachment is not disdain. It's awareness that the game cannot be won, only understood. That understanding, however, carries an emotional toll. Many of history's greatest minds, from Pascal to Nietzsche to Kafka, wrestled with despair, born of clarity. To see too much of the world's pattern is to feel its weight. Schopenhauer never denied this burden, but he offered a way to bear it. His remedy was solitude, not as exile, but as freedom. To him, solitude was the natural habitat of the thinker, a realm where one's intellect could roam without the noise of conformity. Alone, the mind could pursue truth without compromise. He urged those of high intellect to stop seeking validation from the masses. The crowd, he believed, cannot appreciate what it does not understand. Instead, thinkers should find kinship with other minds across time through books, art, and philosophy. Reading, he said, was conversation with the finest minds of past centuries. Within those pages, the isolated could find communion that transcends the limits of their own era. Yet solitude for Schopenhauer was not a withdrawal from life, but a higher form of engagement with it. By stepping back, the thinker observes human behavior with sharper focus. He advised against sharing profound insights recklessly. Truth offered to unready minds often provokes hostility. Wisdom, he believed, was not only knowing what to say, but when and to whom. His vision painted intelligence as a paradoxical blessing. It grants freedom from illusion, but costs belonging. To think deeply is to walk a narrow ridge between enlightenment and loneliness. But that loneliness, he argued, is the necessary companion of authenticity. A mind that refuses to sleep must learn to find peace in its own company. And perhaps that is Schopenhauer's most enduring lesson. The world may never fully accept deep thinkers, but they do not need its approval. Their clarity, though isolating, is also liberating. It allows them to live truthfully, to see beauty without distortion, and to understand that meaning arises not from society's applause, but from self-realization. Intelligence, then, is both cross and compass, a burden that also shows the way. If deep thinkers are so often misunderstood, what can they do to exist peacefully within a world that rarely speaks their language? The first step, Schopenhauer suggested, is understanding that rejection is not personal, it's structural. Society is designed for stability, not for disruption. Most people prioritize belonging over truth, familiarity over awareness. Expecting them to react warmly to ideas that unravel their comfort is to misread human nature itself. Wisdom begins with acceptance. Not everyone will understand, and that is all right. To navigate this, thinkers must learn what Schopenhauer called the art of wise detachment. It means observing without bitterness, understanding the limitations of others without losing compassion. Not every conversation is an opportunity for revelation. Not every audience is ready for the same depth. A deep mind must learn discretion, the ability to choose when to speak and when silence carries greater strength. The world resists being awakened before it is ready, and the wise do not waste energy shaking the unshakable. He also urged intellectuals to seek resonance instead of recognition. Most people want applause. Thinkers need alignment. You don't need millions to understand you, only a few who do. History's most profound dialogues often occurred not between crowds, but between kindred minds scattered across time. When you read a philosopher, a scientist, or an artist who sees as you do, you are no longer alone. Books become bridges between isolated souls, forming quiet alliances that stretch across centuries. Modern psychology supports this view. Research on social dynamics shows that human beings crave psychological safety more than intellectual stimulation. When someone challenges group beliefs, The collective instinctively closes ranks. This isn't malice, it's evolutionary programming. For millennia, survival depended on cohesion, not innovation. Early humans who questioned the tribe risked exile, and exile meant danger. That same instinct lingers in modern life. When you introduce disruptive ideas, the brain of your listener interprets them as threats to belonging. The reaction, dismissal, avoidance, even hostility, is a relic of that ancient survival code. Understanding this can save deep thinkers from unnecessary pain. When someone resists your perspective, it's rarely because you're wrong, it's because their brain is defending the status quo. The right approach, then, is patience, not confrontation. You can't force awareness, you can only model it. By embodying calm intelligence rather than combative superiority, you invite curiosity instead of fear. As Schopenhauer put it, to truth belongs a divine patience. Another principle he emphasized was measured engagement. He warned against sharing profound insights recklessly, comparing it to offering a banquet to those who are not hungry. The wise observe society, learn its patterns, and speak where their words can take root. This isn't elitism, it's efficiency. A gardener doesn't scatter seeds on stone. A thinker shouldn't cast truth into hostility. Yet while solitude and restraint protect the mind, they must not harden it. Schopenhauer cautioned that isolation should refine, not embitter. The goal is not to withdraw from humanity, but to understand it from a vantage of clarity. Deep thought should lead to compassion, not contempt. The thinker's task is not to escape the world, but to interpret it, to hold a mirror steady even when others look away. This balance between solitude and engagement is delicate but essential. A thinker who isolates completely risks cynicism. One who conforms loses authenticity. The harmony lies in selective connection, engaging deeply with the few who value truth while maintaining peaceful distance from the many who fear it. Modern thinkers can take these insights further. In an age of distraction and algorithms, protecting depth requires discipline. The constant flood of shallow information dulls attention and weakens reflection. To preserve clarity, one must choose silence deliberately, time away from the noise, space to process, think, and rebuild. Solitude today is not accidental, it is an act of resistance. And yet the isolation of the intelligent mind is not entirely a tragedy. Within it lies the seed of freedom. To see the world clearly, even if alone, is to live authentically. You may lose comfort, but you gain perspective. You may lose belonging, but you inherit independence. Every thinker must eventually decide which form of loneliness they prefer. The loneliness of being misunderstood or the loneliness of self-betrayal. One imprisons, the other liberates. This ultimately is Schopenhauer's gift to every era, a philosophy that transforms solitude from curse to privilege. He understood that intelligence distances, but it also dignifies. It strips away illusion and replaces approval with integrity. Deep thinkers may walk alone, but they walk awake. And though society might never fully embrace them, civilization itself depends on their willingness to keep walking. To understand why deep thinkers face constant friction, we must look at how society trains the mind from childhood. The rejection of intellect doesn't start in adulthood. It begins in the classroom. Schools claim to nurture intelligence, but what they truly reward is obedience. The education system prizes memorization, punctuality, and compliance over genuine curiosity. Students who repeat accepted answers rise to the top, while those who question authority are often labeled as disruptive. The message is subtle but consistent. Think, but not too freely. Creativity is encouraged only within the safety of pre-approved boundaries. The pattern continues into adulthood. In most workplaces, conformity outweighs creativity. Corporations favor those who maintain harmony, not those who challenge inefficiency or question hierarchy. Promotion often depends more on likability than insight. Even industries that claim to champion innovation quietly suppress dissent. An employee who exposes uncomfortable truths threatens stability, and stability is the currency of institutions. Politics follows the same rhythm. The most logical, evidence-driven voices rarely win mass support. Instead, leaders who promise comfort and certainty rise to power. People gravitate toward those who affirm their worldview, not those who complicate it. Emotional reassurance outweighs intellectual rigor. This is why populists flourish while philosophers fade into obscurity. The crowd doesn't seek enlightenment, it seeks relief. The digital age has only magnified these tendencies. Online spaces that once promised open dialogue now thrive on emotional manipulation. Algorithms are designed not to educate but to retain attention. Outrage spreads faster than understanding, and controversy earns more clicks than clarity. Platforms favor content that triggers, not content that teaches. A thoughtful discussion cannot compete with a 15-second burst of drama. As a result, the collective mind becomes addicted to stimulation and allergic to depth. Social media's architecture itself works against deep thinkers. It compresses complex ideas into fragments, turning philosophy into slogans and nuance into noise. Those who can simplify, exaggerate, or sensationalize are rewarded with visibility, while those who prefer depth fade into obscurity. It's not that intelligent voices disappear, they're simply drowned out by volume. The currency of attention devalues reflection. This environment breeds echo chambers, digital tribes that reinforce existing beliefs instead of challenging them. Within them, people encounter only ideas that echo their own. The more insulated these bubbles become, the more hostile they grow toward difference. A deep thinker entering such a space is perceived not as a contributor, but as a disruptor. Their role as truth seeker conflicts with the collective desire for validation. The result is rejection, not reason. This rejection, however, doesn't only unfold online, it permeates every level of modern life. Institutions that should nurture intellect often suppress it. The same schools that punish curiosity later produce workplaces that discourage innovation. The same society that celebrates thinking outside the box quietly penalizes anyone who actually does. In public life, politicians who challenge the majority are branded idealists, radicals, or heretics. The system rewards what is safe, repeatable, and profitable, not what is profound. History proves that this resistance isn't accidental. It's a design choice rooted in psychology. Humans crave certainty and belonging. Questioning authority threatens both. The majority's fear of the unknown keeps the machinery of society running smoothly. People defend the familiar even when it harms them. Psychologists call this system justification, the tendency to rationalize and maintain structures of power, even unjust ones, simply because they exist. The comfort of predictability outweighs the discomfort of truth. The irony is that while the world publicly praises intelligence, it privately fears it. We admire Einstein in textbooks, but silence the modern voices who challenge us in real time. We quote philosophers, but avoid philosophy in conversation. We claim to value critical thinking, but teach children that questioning is defiance. The worship of intellect becomes ceremonial, safe, sanitized, and distant from life itself. In this landscape, deep thinkers face a difficult choice: conform and belong, or question and stand apart. Yet isolation, while painful, is not without purpose. History shows that every meaningful change began with someone who refused to obey the comfortable lie. Every discovery, every movement, every awakening came from a mind unwilling to accept inherited truths. The thinker's struggle is not just personal, it's civilizational. To think deeply in such a world is to resist quietly. It is to choose awareness over ease, authenticity over applause. While algorithms reward noise, silence remains the thinker's weapon, the space where real ideas form before they are diluted by the crowd. Deep thought has always been a rebellion, and in the digital era, that rebellion continues in the most radical act of all, refusing to be superficial. So what does all this mean for those who think deeply in a world built for comfort? It means that misunderstanding is not failure. It's proof that you are exploring terrain others have not yet mapped. Society's resistance is the friction that polishes ideas into truth. The thinker's path has never been smooth. It isn't meant to be. Growth, whether personal or collective, requires tension between what is known and what must be questioned. Deep thinkers, therefore, must learn not to shrink from solitude, but to harness it. Solitude is not the absence of connection, it's the presence of clarity. It's the environment where the mind can stretch without interruption, where half-formed insights mature into understanding. When the noise of conformity fades, intuition grows louder. Every philosopher, inventor, and artist who transformed the world began in that quiet space, far from applause. To exist in that stillness takes courage. The world praises confidence yet punishes conviction that disrupts comfort. It tells you to be bold but only within its boundaries. To think beyond them is to risk exile. Yet exile can become empowerment when you realize that independence of thought is a form of freedom. The crowd trades authenticity for approval. The thinker learns that solitude is the price of integrity. History confirms that the minds who once walked alone ultimately paved roads for others to follow. The ideas that once provoked fear later became foundations of progress. What begins as heresy becomes heritage. Humanity, slow as it may seem, eventually catches up to its thinkers, but only because those thinkers refused to stop walking when the world turned its back. So if you've ever felt the sting of being dismissed for asking difficult questions, take it as evidence that your vision extends beyond what most can bear to see. You are not arrogant for wanting depth. You are alive in a world that numbs itself with simplicity. The discomfort of your insight is not a curse. It is the mind's way of telling you that truth matters more than belonging. Still, remember what Schopenhauer and others quietly taught. Intelligence without compassion becomes bitterness, and clarity without humility becomes isolation. The task of the deep thinker is not only to perceive, but also to understand, to translate insight into empathy and awareness into patience. The goal is not superiority, but sincerity. Real wisdom doesn't alienate, it illuminates. In practice, that means carrying your depth lightly. Speak where curiosity lives, not where defensiveness rules. Share your knowledge not to prove, but to invite. Choose stillness when the noise grows too loud. Protect your time, your attention, and your wonder. They are the soil from which every original thought grows. Seek those rare minds that mirror your curiosity and treat them as sanctuaries. Because ultimately, society's evolution depends on the very people it misunderstands. Every generation needs individuals willing to think before others dare to listen. Without them, progress halts and culture decays into repetition. The world may resist deep thinkers in the present, but it will live by their ideas in the future. So when you feel alone in your thoughts, remember, you are part of an ancient lineage of questioners, observers, and truth seekers. You are not disconnected from humanity. You are its conscience. You are the reminder that comfort without reflection breeds stagnation. And though your path may often be silent, it shapes the noise that follows. If the crowd fears depth, go deeper anyway. If no one listens, keep thinking. Because every age that mocks its thinkers eventually kneels before their insight. The isolation of the intelligent is not emptiness. It is the birthplace of change. In the end, civilization moves forward, not because the many understand, but because the few refuse to stop understanding.